Hello, everybody. We are happy to welcome the Trainer Facilitator Network to our second webinar, and happy Friday to you all. I am Helen, Africa Lead Capacity Building Specialist, coming from Training Resources Group in Arlington, Virginia. Our topic for today's webinar is how human-centered design can support food security in Africa. This is an exciting webinar we have by popular demand. We heard your votes for this topic, and we are very pleased to present it to you today. I would like to now pass the mic over to Shannon Sarbo, our Deputy Chief of Party for Africa Lead.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. Happy Friday. We're really pleased to host you on this second webinar. Just quickly, I think most of you are familiar with Africa Lead, but I just wanted to mention that my role is supporting our continental programs, which is a lot of working with the African Union on CADEP processes and helping to get those processes more integrated at country level and encourage country ownership. So that is why I'm here today, to kind of be a part of this discussion. So thanks again.
Great. Thank you, Shannon. And my name is Richard Glass. I'm a organization development and training consultant here at TRG along with Helen. And I'm really excited to be talking with all of you today about human-centered design, what it is, and hopefully how this process can help you a little bit in some of the complex problems, situations, events that you're dealing with and that you're facing. And hopefully this will kind of give you some ideas on how how you might be able to address some of these in a new way, and maybe come up with solutions that you haven't already found. I'm excited to be talking with you about this today. Before I joined TRG about a year ago, I was with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, so I'm excited to be working and talking about food security and Feed the Future, because that's something I worked on a little bit at U.S. Department of Agriculture. And I introduced and we and talked about this human-centered design in trainings that we gave to leaders on helping them think creatively, also in strategic planning and things like that. So I find it is a very useful tool, a nice thing to have in your toolbox when you're trying new ways to get people to be engaged, to develop solutions that are more likely to be effective. So really excited to be talking with you all today. So some of the objectives that we have for today's meeting. The first one is really coming together as that professional development network of trainers and facilitators to support agriculture policy and food security related coordination processes. The same objective you had in the last webinar. I think it's so important for people to come together, share their ideas, share what's working, what's not working, and recognize that there's a lot of people doing similar things. So that network of people from across the continent who are working on things is so important. So really excited to be helping out and moving and working on that together. And then specifically, I want to talk a little bit about a human-centered design process and how it might help develop these solutions that are more likely to be successful for those complex issues that you're all working on. So you'll kind of learn a little bit about that. I'll also share some resources that you can have to learn even more, because in an hour-and-a-half webinar, we're only gonna touch the surface, and hopefully I'll direct you to places where you can find a lot more really fascinating information and figure out how this might work well in your specific environment. And also, because I think it's so important to take these ideas, take these concepts, take theories, and actually figure out how it might work in the real world, in your real life, we're gonna go through the human design centered process with the situation that hopefully will be relevant to situations that you're facing, that you're dealing with, that's kind of relevant to you, about making events more inclusive, the policy process more inclusive, sustainable, and relevant to all the people that are impacted by the policy. That's kind of the goals of what we're going to be talking about. The hope is that this will be an interactive webinar. We have some questions, we have activities for you to share your thoughts and ideas. Even the human-centered design process is really designed around engaging other people, having that participatory decision making, hearing what other people think, and listening. So kind of my hope is also to design a webinar that's taking advantage of those concepts as well and engaging you in the best possible way. So on to the next slide, we'll be talking a little bit about the technology that we'll be using on Zoom meetings. So maybe hopefully some of you used this before. It's the same webinar that you used before. Hopefully you're all hearing me. So that's the first step, either through the phone or the computer. I think most of you are on the computer. You can definitely adjust the audio options with that little box in the left-hand corner. If you have questions, you want to share something, you can raise your hand and we'll be able to unmute you. So we can hear your voice and your thoughts about some things. I will say most of the dialogue that we're hoping to have will be through the question and answer box. And so we'll be asking you to type your thoughts, type your answers, rather than verbalizing them. And you'll see throughout this webinar a question and answer box pop up, or that little Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner, kind of in the middle of your screen. You'll see a number there. That'll be your cue that, hey, there's a question we'd like you to answer. And so you can type that in there and we'll kind of read them as well. And as a lot of you have already started doing, the chat box, you can see it's turned orange or a different color. So you can see that people are chatting in there, and that's a nice way to just say hi, or if you're having any technical issues or want to communicate specifically just with the panelists rather than answering the specific questions we give, that's the way to do that. And I'll be reminding you about how to do this throughout the webinar as well. Also, I know we have people from all around, and people who maybe most comfortable language is French instead of English. So if, as I'm asking you the questions and you prefer to answer in French, because that helps you brainstorm in the best possible way, that helps you make sense of the questions in the best possible way, maybe you feel the words are more appropriate in French than what you can express in English, you're welcome to do that, and we'll do our best to translate written comments as we can as they're coming in, so we can take advantage of those great ideas that you all have. So one of the first things that we're going to do with the question answer box is I'd like you to write in that Q&A that's going to pop up in a second, your name, and also what country you're calling in that you're joining us from today. So I get, my name's Richard. I'm with Helen and Nancy, who's helping support of the webinar. We're calling from Arlington, Virginia, just right outside of DC. Very hot day already here, but I'd like to hear from you. Please share your name and where you're calling from to help build that network, and we can see who's there. So you'll see that Q&A little box down there. If you click that, you'll hopefully be able to answer those questions by clicking that comment box under there, and we'll be able to see everyone that's joining us. All right, we have Andrea from the US, okay. Olivia calling in from Ghana, excellent. I think, is Tom calling in from Kenya? Is that where he is? Aichi from Tanzania. Mary Leela also from Tanzania. Robert from Nairobi in Kenya. Excellent. You guys are doing a good job of figuring out this question and answer, and I really appreciate that. Excellent. That is also one of my favorite things about working at TRG and a bit when I was at Department of Agriculture, is just interacting with people from all around the world. Technology has made that a little bit easier. Always better to see people face to face, as I'm sure you know. But really kind of exciting and fascinating that we're able to see and talk with each other and connect from all around the world. Excellent. We also have John joining from Ghana as well. Excellent. Well, good. Well, please continue letting us know who's on the line, where you're calling from. You're all this is about building a network too. So you can see who's on this, you can share your ideas, hopefully connect with each other afterwards too, on your own, by phone or email, to share what you thought about this, how you might apply this in your own work, and new ideas that might come about as you're learning about this or being reminded about this. Excellent. So we're talking about human-centered design and what that is. So how many of you have heard about human-centered design before? Actually, if you could just raise your hand if you've heard about human-centered design before, let me know. Click little raise hand button down there. I'm not seeing anyone raise their hand quite yet, except Helen, which is helpful that she's heard of it because she helped ask for it before, which is great. But for a lot of you, maybe this is a new title, a new word for something I think you've probably all been exposed to. At its core, human-centered design is designing things for people. It's thinking and listening to what people are saying, what they need, how they're approaching things. And it's also kind of a mindset. It's really about believing that all problems, even really tough ones that you all are addressing, that we all see in society, like poverty, gender equality, clean water, they're solvable, right? There are answers out there. We haven't figured out exactly what they are yet, but there's answers out there. We're getting closer on some of these. But that optimistic sense that we can address these problems that are really tough and complex. And you all are working a little bit about that in your work on food security. All right, also, it really believes that the people who face these problems every day, they're the ones who hold the key to the answer, right? I think too often, I'm sure we've all seen someone comes in that doesn't understand the community, doesn't understand the situation, doesn't understand the actual people who will be using whatever product or process they're proposing, comes in and says, here's what I need you to do. I'm always reminded of a story I heard when I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I was in Southeastern Europe, in Bulgaria, and I heard this story about a volunteer went into a community in a small village and noticed all the women were leaving the village and having to walk a little bit to go wash their clothes on a river a bit outside of town. And this volunteer, this Peace Corps volunteer, thought, well, that's not a great way to do things. We should really have a place where they can wash their clothes closer into the village, closer in, so they don't have to make that walk. So he wrote a grant, got some money, got this area to wash clothes right in the village. He was all excited about it. People were saying that's great. But after a little while, he noticed the women were still going down to the river, walking to the river to wash the clothes instead of using this new water thing right there. And he got a little confused. He thought he created this great product, great new thing, but it wasn't working. So he actually decided then to talk to the women and found out that, well, actually, they really valued that time of being together as a community, as a group, a little outside of the village, a little outside of their day-to-day, maybe their husbands, maybe other things that are drawing them, where they can tell stories, they can connect as people while they're washing the clothes. So the value, the thing that they were valuing was actually that sense of camaraderie, that sense of community they found, which having the new area to wash right in the village, that took away from that, right? So that was not designing a process or a product that met the needs of the people, because if he had observed and talked with people beforehand, he would have probably developed a different solution, which I think ended up being a different place to wash the clothes, not at the river, but outside of the town a little bit, so you could still get that sense of togetherness and community, right? So it's thinking about how and the consequences of those things. So this is a defined process to kind of go through that, because the people who are going to be using it, they're the ones that have already developed and thought of ways to address those things. If we go to the next slide. A lot of these kind of thoughts, the words, the language that I'll be talking about, like human-centered design and the step-by-step process, was really kind of developed out of Silicon Valley, here out in California. There's a company, Ideation, which has written this field guide to human-centered design. And I'll give you a link at the end of this webinar where you can actually download for free that field guide to human-centered design, which has a lot of great ideas, a lot of step-by-step processes that you as facilitators and trainers, I think, would find really helpful and useful in when you're designing your own events. And I'll give you that reference later. But this is one of the things that Tim Brown says about design thinking. It's about accelerating innovation, coming up with those new solutions, those new creative ideas to address those challenges that we face. And it really starts with people. Rather than thinking of the solution first, or addressing each problem, or complaining about why things aren't working, it starts, well, how are the people actually, what are they doing right now? How are we observing the people find these workarounds, figure out their own solutions to it? How can we make those workarounds or solutions that they've discovered a little easier for them to do that hopefully will make it a better solution to address these problems? And a lot of it's that experimentation, storytelling, understanding the values of what people are holding, testing things out, and maybe failing quickly too, right? That's how we learn, by learning and testing these things in a small way in order to see what will work. And I'll kind of walk you through that process a little bit. And that's a neat book too, Change by Design, if you want to kind of see how they did it. And this process really started out with developing products and marketing. They're kind of recognizing that this process can apply not just to developing a product that we might use, but processes and engaging people and those kind of things, which is all what is so important and what we're all doing as well. Great. So there's kind of three main elements of human capital design, and they detail this a lot in that book, both books. And it's really these three steps. First, we start with the inspiration, right? We got to be excited about things. We got to understand how people are doing things. We got to hear their hopes and desires. That's that human connection, right? We get inspired when we're having these great conversations with people, great ideas, coming up with solutions. We got excited about maybe there is a way we can address the food security issues in Africa. Maybe there is a way that we can address providing clean water, right? And you understand what's working, what's not, their hopes and desires, and really get smart about what is the challenge that you're trying to face, right? Is it broader or narrower than what you're initially thinking right now, right? And then after you're inspired, you're watching people, you're collecting data, you get these ideas, right? These, well, what if we do this? What if we do that? How about we try this way? How about we try that way? That's without brainstorming. You're testing and refining. You're coming up with as many ideas as you can to address that challenge that you're seeing people face. And then, and this is the key, which I think sometimes we don't always remember as important, is implementation, right? That's your chance to actually bring that solution to life. And the reason I like this process, human-centered design, so much is because the implementation starts with small experiments, small little things that you can test and start doing to address it and see what works, and then come up with other new experiments to do it, rather than trying to jump to the large solution and address every issue, every problem. What are some small little things that you can do to get it out of your head, get it out of the ideas and into action, which I think is so important. And I'll be going through each one of these stages in a process that you can do to do that. So this process is kind of designed through these 6 steps as well. And I used this a lot when I was at Department of Agriculture. This company, Experience Point, has partnered with IDEO to provide a lot of resources as well. And one of the resources they provide is you follow this kind of curve in order to get to that experiment stage. And it's important to go through that process too, depending on your personality, depending on how you think. You might want to just jump to trying experiments first because you love the solutions, you love trying things out, but maybe you haven't spent enough time observing the people to figure out what actually will work, right? So we start really on defining the challenge and spending some time thinking of what actually is it that we're trying to solve. What are the issues out there, right? Then observing the people. How are people addressing the challenge right now? What insights do we have about this? By watching these people do this, I realized that the important thing wasn't just watching the clothes. The important thing was getting people, having the time and the space for women to share their stories and what's important to them and connect on a personal level. That's an insight. And then the opportunities. How might we allow people the opportunity to wash their clothes, not in the river, but still have that time where they can connect as people, right? What are some ideas that we can do that? What's a little small experiment we can see if those ideas are worthwhile and functioning well? All right, and Tom just said too, you can download this graphic by clicking that link in the chat box right there. So you can kind of have a copy of that for your own to kind of go through the process. It's a 2-page document. On the other page, the first page is that graphic. The next one is a little bit of more information about that inspire, ideate, and implement stages and what outputs are expected from that. So let's walk through each one of these with a quick example to see how this might work. So in the inspire, again, you're defining the challenge, you're observing people, and you're forming those insights, right? And then that, of course, starts moving into ideate, right? Some of us might be moving to ideate already as soon as we define the challenge, but we want to make sure we're watching the people and what they're doing before we come up with solutions. So if we go to the next slide, which is focused on the defining the challenge, the key questions that are helpful to ask yourself is, what is that problem you're trying to solve, right? What is the ultimate impact you're trying to have? What context and constraints do you face, right? What's going on outside of your control? What could make it difficult to address this challenge? So as one example, I'm going to show you all a picture. You can see this picture. And so we want to define the challenge. So what is the problem that's trying to be solved? Helen, what problem do you think is trying to be solved here?
I think that looks like somebody trying to get somewhere with a whole lot of packages.
Yeah, you're trying to get somewhere with a whole lot of packages. Maybe the problem is it doesn't look very stable either, right? So the problem is, how do we get those packages to where they need to go quickly and maybe safely, right? So that's the challenge that we're going to use for this example. And let's go to the next part. You want to observe people, right? So let's actually look at this picture again and see what behaviors we're seeing, what workarounds, adaptations have been created. What do you think this driver, this woman or this man cares about, and what maybe surprises you? So let's look at that picture again. So Helen, what do you see? What do you notice?
Well, I see a guy on a motorbike that has figured out a way to strap a lot of packages onto his motorbike. So I'm guessing he needs to get somewhere pretty fast to deliver those packages.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I also see he's on a bike with 2 wheels. So many packages. Maybe he's a little narrower than the car. Maybe. You know, I'm not even sure how long it would take for him to get all those packages on there. But observing that he is stable because he balanced it on both sides, right? But it might, you know, might take a lot of weight if he comes to a stop sign, but he can maybe navigate through a little bit pretty quickly. Excellent. If we go to the next slide, I want to highlight a point here is that what people say they do and what they actually do are often different, right? So this driver of that might say, oh, I'm being completely safe and I figured out a great way to do this and it's great. What he's done is he's figured out some workarounds. Is it totally stable? Is it safe? I'm not sure. What is he thinking and feeling? Well, some of my guesses maybe he or she is thinking they're really smart and figured a workaround. Maybe they're also thinking this is ridiculous and I'm going to fall and it's all going to fall apart and this isn't very stable. I'm feeling excited but also nervous. So we're trying to get into the head of the person that we're observing. Also, a key on this too is why it's so important to observe people and why we do this in the human-centered design is that what we often say we want to do and what we actually do can be very different. So we might say we want to eat healthier. We might say we want to work out a lot to be stronger and healthier. Do we actually do that as much as we say? If you're like me and almost everyone else I know, probably not, right? It's hard to actually implement these things for a lot of reasons, right? And there's a lot of good reasons why to do that. So based on that kind of concept a little bit right now, there is a link that we're going to have you fill out right now. I think we'll put it in the chat box, right? To start filling out your Mango app profile. I know that's something that's important for you all to do as a facilitator network. It's helping you all see and figure out who all is there and how they're connecting and things like that. So in the chat box, throughout this conversation. I think at some point during this webinar, you're going to see the link, right? And so that's a form you'll fill out, and then you'll get access later to that actual app, to a website where you'll be to fill it out more. But we want you to actually click that link when you see it in the chat box, fill that out a little bit, because even though you might want to do it right now, you're going to get out this webinar, things are going to happen, other emails you're going to have to occur. It's a Friday, you probably want to go do something else. So you're going to forget about it, and then Tom and these people who want you to do it are going to be bothering you about it. So now's the kind of a time to do that. So you'll see that link right there. If you click that in the chat box, just quickly go to that, fill that out. You'll probably hear me still talking a little bit about this as you're doing this, but it won't take very long to fill it out, just kind of your name and other information. But the rest of the profile information you can fill out later. It's important because this is that collaboration platform for Africa's Lead Food Security Network. And at the end of this webinar, so this is an encouragement to stay on as well, Shannon is going to talk a little bit more about this and what you can expect, okay? So as people are filling that out, I'm going to talk a little bit about that next step, which is an insight or an interpretation, an insight that you're having, right? It's a theme, a pattern you notice that might reveal a little bit about what someone thinks or feels based on clues of what they see or do. We kind of like to start that sentence with a little bit of "seeing this makes me realize that," right? So if we look at the next picture there, some insights, right? We already naturally started doing this when we're looking at this picture because we're human. That's the way our brains work. When we see things, we automatically and very quickly tell a story and make insights and find the patterns and connections about what we're seeing so we can make sense of it. It's very important, though, I think, to separate what you're specifically observing, the facts, right? This person is on a two-wheeled bike. He maybe even put an engine on a bicycle or something. There's a lot of boxes that are balanced. Person is wearing a helmet, so a little concerned about safety, and a lot of packaging on there, but wants to go, but is trying to deliver or carry a lot of different things. So an insight that makes, by sharing that data, that makes me realize what? What does that make you realize, Helen?
I think it makes me realize that this is likely his form of work, and he finds it important to get where he needs to go relatively quickly. It also tells me that perhaps he needs the motorbike to be able to get into narrow places or to weave in and out of traffic, because it looks like there's a lot of motorbikes and cars on the road. So maybe this is his preferred mode of transportation to be able to get into those small places, but he's prioritizing perhaps time and ability to get into small places.
Right. Yeah. It makes me realize that maybe it's important that it's on those two wheels, like Helen said, to get to quickly navigate through these different spots. Right. Makes me realize that has a lot of stuff to do, a lot of those kind of things. Excellent. I also just want to thank everyone who quickly filled that out. An online collaboration platform. Lots of people filling that out, which is great. Also, you'll be logging into this website to get to that. So please don't get too deep into the Africa Food Security Net aspect right now, because you'll have time to do that later. But did want to make sure we had that captive audience here to get you to sign up for it and wanted to do that. So those insights is kind of things we naturally do based on the data we're seeing. And that's okay. Well, maybe you need to get quickly between a couple different places. So after you form the insights, you go to the next step, which is these ideas that you're coming up with. Maybe some of you have already come up with ideas on how to address this problem that this driver is facing, right? And that's where we frame the opportunities, we brainstorm ideas. So when we frame opportunities, what that can look like is you're looking again at what that design challenge that you initially developed, and you're framing or reframing it within the wording of how might we do this, right? So you're framing it around the person or people who will be impacted, right? So it's not how, it's not how might we achieve world peace, but how might we help people live in conflict-free zones within this community, right? It's a little bit more achievable, and it helps open up some thinking to do that, right? Why do we want to do this? Well, we want to keep this person safe. We want to help make sure he still is able to deliver his packages on time. What's preventing us from doing that? Well, that doesn't look like a very stable long-term solution by having all the packages on there, right? So if we look at this right here, frame opportunities, what could be a how might we state we could make for this this driver?
How might we help the driver get where he needs to go safely with his packages? Also, I love what Robert wrote about maybe this bike guy is environmentally conscious and he wants to reduce his carbon footprint. So maybe another question is, how might we help this biker be environmentally conscious as he perhaps wants to be, but still arrive at his location safely?
Yeah, exactly. And I love that you put that there, Tom, too, because I think sometimes when I show this picture, we have situations like this, and you say, well, we have this challenge, we have all these packages on this little bike, and you're like, well, we just need to give the guy a truck, or we need to give him a larger car that doesn't address his environmental concerns. It might not address his ability to weed in between traffic. It might not address his ability to get to these small alleys where he needs to go, right? So we come up with a solution that we think, of course, that's common sense, that makes the most sense, but it is actually relevant to the person, right? Another great question, how do we know what the person actually needs? So in this situation, we're making assumptions and guesses based on what we're observing. In real life, you talk to him, right? You figure out what his needs are, what his values are, those kind of things. So I really do thank you all for engaging these questions in really good points, right? So that's how might we address this, right? We collected the data, hopefully from interviews and talking or observing it, but you don't want to make those assumptions without getting as much data as you can so those opportunities, those brainstorms that make the most sense. So after we go to those frame opportunities, the next one is brainstorm ideas, right? That how might we, I think that I love that language because it opens up, I think, our brain to come up with solutions versus sharing all, saying, well, this isn't going to work because of X, Y, Z. So how might we help this person get safely and quickly to where they need to go? So what are some wild ideas? No judgment at all, just some ideas that you have, Helen, in order to help accomplish that how might we?
Oh, well, I'm just loving what I'm seeing here from Dell about designing safe and simple package delivery mechanisms that can be easily pulled by the bike.
Yeah.
So we go with that one.
That's a great how might we. Excellent. Thank you, Dell. So what are some brainstorms that both Helen, you have, and others? Type them in the chat box. What brainstorms do you have about how we can design a safe and simple package delivery mechanism that can easily be pulled by bike?
Well, I'm going to piggyback on that one. That maybe an idea would be to create a kind of frame for a bike that could safely balance a lot of weight on both sides. Maybe another idea is working with the city administration and create a special lane for bikes that are wider because they're carrying heavy loads.
Yeah, that's a neat idea. Yeah, wild idea. You could just get a really big backpack. Right? No judgment here. Wild ideas. But the point is you want to get as many ideas as you can, right? We're building on these things. We got the bike lane, maybe some designing a bike that can hold those packages, and maybe you can protect them too, because, right, if this person goes and delivers that box on the top, and then someone says, hey, I want this box, and steals it, then one, they've lost the package, two, now the whole thing's not balanced, right? So what are some ways of how can we get this balanced correctly? How can we do this, right? Exactly, and that find out why he decided to do what he's doing is so important, and that's that data observing people and figuring it out. Unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity to talk to this person, which is now what I really want to do, is be able to talk to the person and figure it out. But that's exactly what we need to do, Mary, is talk to the person and figure it out, because that's where the good ideas are going to come from, right? And for this exercise, we're just kind of coming up with the brainstorm. So a lot of good ideas on how to do this. So then the next activity that we do after that is we try some experiments. So let's take that idea of developing a bike that has a kind of package, those kind of things. what is some low risk, quick and easy, and generative, meaning that we can learn things from that and maybe expand on to make it a more sustainable long-term solution that we could help with this, address this situation. What do you think, Helen?
Well, so maybe we have some local engineers come up with a solution, and then we get some bikers around town that are willing to give it a try.
Yeah, give it a try, see if that works, see what they like about it, see what they don't. Maybe do a quick mock-up so it's not just those kind of things. So if we go to the next slide, let's look at that picture one last time. What do we want to try, right? Maybe there's a quick way we can build more of a box container at the bottom so we can hold all those packages in a stable way. Less need for the rope tying, which would be quicker, right? Maybe if you get packages in and out quicker, if it was a more stable thing, but still on those two wheels, right? So now I'm feeling inspired. Like we came up with some neat ideas to address this situation, right? And kind of going through that process with something that is just one picture of a person facing a challenge, facing a situation that's a bit surprising. We can come up with these ideas that might be more relevant. And of course, like hearing Olivia and others say, talking to the person collecting the data is so important. But we kind of go through that process to hopefully develop a solution that would be more effective than just giving him a truck or something that actually wouldn't meet his needs, but we're just assuming that, he just needs a bigger vehicle. But actually, no, that's not it, right? So that's an example of how we can do that. And if you have questions, thoughts as we're going through this, please type those in as well. Anything that's kind of not clear, because the next activity that we're going to do in a few minutes is think a situation be a bit more relevant to you, unless maybe you are delivering packages on a bike through crowded traffic, and so that resonates with you, but maybe not. I bike a fair amount, but I don't have all that stuff on my bike. So we're going to take actually something about the policy process and go through those steps and ask those questions. And I want to hear from all of you to see what solutions that we can come up with as a network to address something that is relevant to your life and your job, right? So again, we start with that inspiration, right? What is the problem we're trying to do? How do we want to do it? What are those ideas that we can come up with about how might we address this? What are some small experiments that we can try, kind of a safe, low-cost way that we can learn from and then build on to address some of these challenges. So we'll be going through this process kind of step by step now. Again, we're going to go through this document. If you haven't already downloaded the document that I think Tom put in the chat box, through a Google Drive that you can download, encourage you to do that as well. But we'll just be walking through each one of these once again. To a real life problem in food security. So that's this objective we're doing right now. That's good. All right. So again, on the challenge, these are the questions I want you to ask. I think asking these open-ended questions, as I'm sure you all know as facilitators and trainers, that's how you generate dialogue, that's how you generate new ideas. What is the problem you're trying to solve? What is the ultimate impact you're trying to have? What context and constraints do you face? So I was talking with Shannon about this as we were planning this webinar beforehand. What we came up with on the challenge is the current policy process is not inclusive, sustainable, or resilient. And I want to turn it over to Shannon to talk a little bit about her thoughts about this challenge and why it was chosen for this webinar. Shannon?
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, so we were going back and forth on really coming up with a challenge that was at the right level for this discussion. We heard earlier when Rich was describing this step, you want to tackle complex issues, of course, but using a case study of how do we solve world peace is probably not the most useful or helpful for this discussion today. So we all know that agricultural transformation and sort of policy-led agricultural transformation is what we all care about, and is sort of our road or pathway for addressing food security. So we all know that's the broader context, but we wanted to make sure that we took advantage of the group of experts that we have on the call today, really use your experience and expertise to its fullest and maximize the sort of creative energy of everybody on the call today. So that's why we decided to focus on process. I think we all know that process isn't the end in itself. We're not interested in inclusivity just for inclusivity's sake, but I think in your work, certainly in our work on Africa Lead, we really believe strongly that a good process is a necessary factor in achieving the outcomes we're interested in. So, it may alone process probably isn't sufficient on its own. You need good technical solutions. You need sort of political will. You need, so many other factors. The stars do have to align, but none of that really matters if the process isn't sort of inclusive and sustainable, and something that we all feel is kind of transparent and participatory. So we sort of feel this way, I think, intuitively, and also I think experience shows that these sort of process pieces are important because it sort of shares the decision making. And when you share decision making, you bring more people in, and that helps to accelerate implementation, which is really what it's all about anyway. So I think we could have put a lot of challenges forward, but we're going to start with this one and sort of imagine in your country, in your context, the policy process. And this is meant to sort of be broad enough to mean, vertical processes. So maybe how subnational processes are linked with the national level, sort of capital down to subnational levels, or it could actually be within an organization, within an institution, sort of horizontally. How is the Ministry of Agriculture reaching across to nutrition, to finance, to planning? So yeah, I think we wanted to make this sort of specific enough that we could have a good conversation, but broad enough that we could really leverage a variety of your perspectives. So I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you, Shannon. And as we go into that a little bit and going through this process, I did want to just highlight a great question that John put in there as well. And I think we're going to answer that in a lot of more detail during the question and answer session that we have later. But it's a question about, one, these principles of human capital design, they're at play in your design work anyway, right? I don't think this is a new concept. I think maybe putting a new language or framework into things you already do, and maybe a defined process to do this. And the idea behind this too is I like to think of, are there elements of this that you can apply and use that maybe it's a little different than you've done before versus going through the exact process as it is, right? And I also wanted to remind everyone at the end of this, there's a free download of a PDF about the Human-Centered Design Toolkit with a lot of very activities, questionnaires, free things that you can do to kind of get at this about observing people, having people form insights, how might we, that are completely free, that maybe as a trainer and facilitator, you could use some of those to, as a different tool, a toolbox to do as you're going through this process, right? The larger question of, is there the time to go observe and collect the data correctly, as opposed to developing a solution when you're maybe developing the statement of work or the contract before you've had the chance to observe it? A larger question I kind of want to hold and maybe brainstorm with others at the question and answer session at the end of it, because I think that's a really good point. I guess how do we use this ourselves too? So also want to hold that question a little bit, and thank you for putting that in there, John. And if others have questions, things you're wondering about, seeing these challenges, please type them in so we can make sure we address them at the question and answer session at the end. So going specifically back to this, and wanted to take advantage of your experience, like Shannon said, and what you've noticed when either you've led policy process discussions or you participated in them. You know, and the challenge that Shannon highlighted is that when she sees this happen, it's not inclusive, it's not necessarily sustainable, right? People might say we are doing things, you know, we want to engage everyone, but the reality is they don't make decisions based on what they hear when they're engaging with the different actors. So, and it's not resilient, right? So as you're thinking about times when you've been in that situation, when you either led or participated in these policy things, think about what behaviors do you see people do? What behaviors did you see from the people leading the meeting? What behaviors do you see from the non-state actors? How do people respond if they're feeling like they're not being engaged? Those kind of things. What do you think people care about? Why are they going to those meetings? Why is this policy process important or not important to them? And anything that surprises you when you think back to when you're watching yourself or others during these meetings, what kind of surprised you through that? So if we go to the next slide, you know, that's the thing I'd like to hear from you is those observations that you see when you're watching people engage in the policymaking process in whatever environment you're most used to. What do you see people do? What data can you share with us that helps answer that question? So I think we have the Q&A right there is going to be populated. So I'd like you to type your answer by clicking that type answer and share what behaviors, what do you see people do? What do you see them do in that policy making process that is aligned with that challenge about it's not resilient, inclusive, things like that. Comment on that question there and type the answer box. And as you're doing this, Shannon, what behaviors do you notice that you've noticed when you're thinking about this challenge?
Yeah, so maybe while people are thinking, some things that come to mind to me are there are siloed ways of working. So it is really hard, it seems, for people to reach across, kind of work collaboratively, even within their own organizations, let alone cross organizations. Information and data is not shared. People kind of hold their data themselves. And then because of that, a lot of times you see decisions are made without evidence. So, you know, motivated, sort of politically motivated decisions, whether that be kind of a prioritization process that doesn't take the evidence into consideration, or sort of funding decisions. And then another thing that I observe is there can be an adversarial relationship between the government and groups outside the government. So whether that's private sector or civil society, rather than being seen as partners, sort of, you know, an adversarial dynamic.
Great, good point. And Dell writes too, people are not homogeneous, of course, so we need broader categorization, such as people from government, NSA, private sector, et cetera, right? And maybe decisions do not seem to be supported with data, right? We're coming up with these insights. One of the things that I did before I joined TRG, I worked a lot with indigenous communities within the United States. And one of the things that we have it's a fundamentally, officially a government-to-government relationship. So when the U.S. federal government is making policies and laws and rules that impact tribal communities in the U.S., there's supposed to be a consultation process where that you're supposed to have an engaged, inclusive conversation and dialogue before you're even coming up with the federal government's coming up with the rules and regulations to engage in. So those meetings, what I noticed when I saw them is there was not, people from tribes would come up and say, you know, you've done this process in the past and we share ideas, we share our thoughts, we try to engage with you as partners, but then we don't see the rules and regulations are what they end up looking like do not resonate with us at all. It's not at all what we said. you know, I don't trust, and they say things like, I don't trust that you're going to take this information, that you don't take this seriously, that you're not actually engaging with us. You've already come up with the solution yourself, and you're just going through check the checkbox. So I don't think you're actually engaging in true tribal consultation. And then I noticed from the federal employee side, you know, they would become very defensive. They would say that's not the case, or they would say large, vague statements and not really addressing the issue. So those are some of the behaviors I saw, right? And then Robert says, right, the tokenism, where certain groups like youth and women are invited just for show or optics, feel like they need to, right? Often the right women or youth are not in the process, and therefore the inclusion is meaningless. I love that you all are giving real life examples that are important and real, right? So they think they go through the process, but they don't actually really want that dialogue. They don't really are curious about what they want to hear. They're just inviting them for the show is something that you're noticing, right? Also, you know, we don't have that big of a group, so we're going to unmute as well. So if you'd like to share verbally, please raise your hand and we'll be able to unmute you about some of the ideas, what you're seeing, what you're noticing within the policy making process where you are. Yeah, and if you want to do that, John says some participants are just there, not capable of contributing, right? And so the question I would ask then is, what do you see that makes you come to the conclusion that they're not capable of contributing, right? What behaviors, what situation, what environment, you know, what's causing that situation where they're not capable of contributing, right? I mean, in my past experience, not capable of contributing either because they were cynical because every time they contributed in the past, it didn't mean anything, or they didn't trust that because of the past history of the federal government with tribal communities, there was not a lot of trust there. Mary, great point. People are usually not aware that this process is their business, right? They don't actually see that engaging early might help. They have to stir to make us realize the need, especially in poverty-stricken scenarios and situations, right, where there's other priorities that are right in front of us as opposed to maybe going to these meetings that might be difficult to get to or things like that. Other things that I often saw is the tribal consultation, instead of being in the tribal community, was in DC, right? A lot of cost and effort involved in coming there. Are you actually hearing from the community members if it's not in the community versus in the capital? Yep, people from government have the tendency to present if it's a silver bullet, and non-state actors tend to be critical, right? And a recognition of those roles and where it's safe to fail and those kind of things. Excellent, you guys are all sharing some wonderful, really good ideas and that are hard to address, and that as trainers and facilitators, I imagine, is part of your role to do. So I'm glad you're doing this. So they respond to requests to participate, but they're not equipped to provide what is required. The access to participate is there, but not in a position to participate meaningfully, right? Depending on how they've designed the meeting, if there's even a question and answer session, if all the airtime is taken over by the government actors instead of the non-state actors, you know, these kind of environments of how the meeting is designed can very much shape into that. Excellent. Also, if you have, I'm going to be asking some other questions and now on the insights. And we already kind of shared some of these, a theme, a pattern you notice that might get to how people are thinking or feeling. I want to kind of share, how does this make people feel when they're not engaged, when they don't feel like they can share this, when they think it's a waste of time, when they don't have the opportunity to really share their thoughts based on what the clues that you already said they do. So seeing this, reading all those things that you all put in the chat, it makes me realize what. So please raise your hand, and I want to hear from you. Seeing this, reading this, what your colleagues have said, that makes me realize what? You're welcome to chat or raise your hand. Anyone raising their hand quite yet? Okay. The right people maybe are not invited to participate, from Olivia. And these are big questions I'm asking, which don't really have very quick and easy solutions. So I recognize I want to give people some time to think about these things as well.
Looks like John and Mary have their hands raised.
Okay, wonderful. Let's hear from John. We're working a little bit on the unmuting technology aspect of it.
Mary, it looks like you're muted on your side.
You want to do a small experiment, test to see Mary, John, or anyone if you want to try speaking. We'll see if we can hear you.
Mary, it looks like your audio is on. Why don't you go ahead and try?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, Mary. Great.
Oh, thank you so much. I realize that when I see such things, that these people, or ourselves, we are really not aware of what we are expected or what we are supposed to do. We are really trying to think of ourselves and how to feed ourselves, how to do the work to earn or economically raise ourselves, but we don't think of food security as a part, as something that would make people really grow and become even better than we are now. And that's why we have the stunting situations and all this in our countries.
Excellent. Thank you, Mary, so much. Yes, what I'm hearing is people aren't seeing how the food security issue is related to other the things that they care about right now, right? They're not seeing how it definitely relates to it and their role in that and in those conversations. So I like the way you phrase that. It makes me realize this, right? Dell also said, seeing people being quiet in policy dialogues makes me realize that they're resistant or not convinced about it. Excellent way to phrase it, Dell. Thank you so much. Other hands raised or? Okay, it looks like, John, you have an older version of Zoom that does not allow to talk, but you raised your hand, so that might be what's going on right there. Technology seems, I feel like I was just introduced to Zoom like 2 months ago, so I'm surprised there's an older version already, but it works these days. So welcome to type those answers in, but that was a great makes me realize comment. I'm going to move to the next slide here. About framing opportunities, because we already you're already probably thinking of what are some ways that we might be able to do this, right? How might we create an environment where people are able to see how food security relates to their lives? How might we be able to get people more engaged in this? How might we get people to see how this, how their voice is important on this, right? So see, we still have some hands raised, and I want to open up the lines to anyone who wants to speak as well. Is everyone unmuted or?
So Mary raising her hand.
Okay.
So she's not unmuted herself.
Okay, so yeah, Mary, please share your thoughts on this.
Yeah. Am I heard? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, yes.
Okay. I think the best thing is to be with the people, to be where they are and to see what they're actually doing. My organization is working on grassroots women groups and the kind, and that's where we realize that these people are the ones who are impacted, and that's where we start our innovations. We do reconnaissance surveys, speak with the women, live there, stay there, and with them, and that's where we discover what is really making them, or what is really affecting them as far as food security is concerned.
Great. Yeah, that having that, observing the people, having those dialogue, having those conversations, so important. Thank you. And that gets to too about what Dell says too. What a lot of people are saying about observing the people, getting them engaged. Also, we hear from Dell here that the private sector maybe is blindly supported when they have a stake. Right? The environment is not, it's not safe for them to share their thoughts on it. It's better to just support it versus engaging in meaningful dialogue about how this actually might impact the people they're working with.
I think that was Mary Liwa. I recognize your voice. And I think Mary Marimi also has her hand raised. Mary, did you want to add?
Oh, you'll have to unmute, Mary. There we go.
Yep.
There you are. We heard you for just a second, Mary.
Right. What I was saying, I had raised my hand for the previous question on why they might not contribute much on the policy making process. And I think I posted that. I said either because the processes have been more done by technocrats, and now when you call in the participating clients, the skill may not be there, or the culture has always been technocrats doing that. So it's not their strong area.
Excellent. Good point, right? So the people are focusing just on the technical aspect or sharing those things versus the dialogue, or maybe they're not in decision-making authority either, right? So they're not sending people to have these policy dialogues that can influence the decisions in the same way. That's a story I'm telling myself when I hear about the techno aspect, the technocrat aspect of it.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, this is Shannon, just jumping in on Mary's point. I think that's great. I think, you know, there's an expectation that if you are invited to participate, that somehow that also means you, like Mary said, have the skills and sort of culture to know what meaningful participation is. And that's kind of, you know, a different thing. So there is this sort of assumption there that invitation or sort of a seat at the table is all that's needed. And that's not necessarily true.
Very good points. John, I think we've been able to address, hopefully, the audio issues. So we'd like to hear from you if possible, or not. Maybe we don't have the...
It looks like we're not seeing a microphone icon, so maybe there's not a mic.
Okay. Well, John and everyone is putting excellent comments in the chat box and the Q&A as well. I just want to thank you all for doing that. We are seeing some really great things in there. And good points, right? So address these. Oh.
Are you there, John? We see your microphone.
All right, John, let's see if we can hear you.
His microphone might be bad.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, and I have a new design challenge now about improving Zoom, where the audio is working on the different things, things like that, right? So it's looking at these as opportunities to learn and things like that. So John, definitely encourage you to keep typing those things in, like the rest of the people as well, because you're really giving some really rich, fruitful comments and dialogues on these, both verbally and in writing. So thank you so much. So these framing opportunities, how might we address some of these things? So I'm wondering, Shannon, Helen, others on the call in the chat, what do you think is a good how might we statement that we could use to address this policy process? How might we create that more inclusive dialogue? How might we get people to recognize their role in this? How might we, maybe how might we let people see that food security is a relevant issue for them?
So I'm thinking from the facilitators and trainers perspective, one question might be, how can we help facilitate a more inclusive dialogue, a more inclusive process, so that when there is a meeting and we have all these different stakeholders together, what can we do as trainers and facilitators to help create that space where people, regardless of what sector they're a part of, they can speak and their voice can be heard.
Great. Yeah, and I think, and Robert has some great ideas there too. I just noticed on some ideas, right, about seeing a challenge from different perspective is helpful. If we can articulate the what's in it for me question for all the different groups, that's a balanced decision might emerge, right? Because people, we naturally think of how it's going to impact us in our own perspective. Being able to see how it's impacting others is really, it can open up to new responses. And also Robert's great point there too, about using these emotional words, right? How does it make you feel versus how does it make you think? We're trying to get to what people are behaving and what they're doing. And they're also often, we behave based on how we feel and how it makes us feel. Even if we might logically agree with something, if it doesn't feel right, we don't want to do it. It's tough to do, those kind of things. So, how might we kind of create that? Some great ideas here. And just looking at a little bit of the questions as well. All right, so if we go to the, John also says, our passion will be demonstrated by the way we lead the meetings. We cannot sell if we do not have a confidence in the product we are selling, right? So we get into some great brainstorms, right? How might we become more passionate about this? How might we get people to see how food security is important to their daily life, right? Raising alarms on food security whenever we can make it part of our lives from Mary. These great brainstorms, right? We got to raise alarms, let people see this. We got to have confidence in it of what we're trying to get people engaged in, what we're selling. These are coming in through the chat box as well. So I want to hear from all of you. What brainstorms do you have to address these things you're hearing and thinking about on addressing this challenge about getting people more engaged in the policy process, those kind of things? How might we create the confidence that every participant is able to input matters and take these things seriously, right? Yeah, and some of those ideas were by us having the confidence, by you all having the confidence as facilitators. Great, great. Let's get some other brainstorms to address this. All right, and as you're typing them too, some of you might not be saying all the chats because it's going, if you put in the chat, I think the default, maybe unfortunately, is to all panelists as opposed to all panelists and attendees. So you can sometimes drop down to get all panelists and attendees so we can all see it. So John says, mastery of the subject matter. It helps to build that confidence, right? If you know what you're talking about, it can feel that. You're more likely to believe in what you're saying, of course, yeah. Excellent. Anyone on the line like to share some brainstorms you have? Be empathetic. Easier said than done, but by talking to people, listening to people, understanding their perspective, and observing the data, that's how we get to be empathetic, by actually listening to what people are saying. Excellent. Excellent.
I think as trainers and facilitators, it's important for us to find ways of communicating that, a meeting is part of a broader process. It isn't just the meeting. And I think we can all appreciate that. So how we sort of communicate, how we frame things within a larger process can help to make it more inclusive, kind of a bigger tent, because it's not just about physically being in the room on a certain day.
Yeah, and then Dell says that transparency policy process, it's evidence-based. We have about 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure we have some questions. So I want to move to the next slide about experiments. My temptation, based on what I'm hearing from you, is, an experiment could be something like, how might we make sure that we use more feeling words in the questions we're asking? What's an experiment that you all could do to get people to share what they're feeling, to get everyone to be more empathetic with other perspectives and people that are in different situations than they are? How can you facilitate or engage in the policy process yourself to get to more of that empathetic feeling perspective and feeling? And Robert says that pre-meeting and post-meeting processes are just as critical, spending time and energy on those, right? And maybe is there an experiment within that where you can spend time and energy on designing it where people are talking not just in the technical aspect, but how this is impacting them in their daily lives and how they're feeling. What are some experiments you could do as a network to help you all do that in the best possible way?
So one experiment that I'd love to do is to remove tables from a room where we have a meeting of diverse stakeholders. I found that sometimes the tables become a barrier between people, and so I'd love to see what would happen if we took the tables out and people were sitting in circles and just closer to each other. I wonder if that would help people relate and maybe even build some trust if there isn't too much trust between them.
Great, yeah, that's a good example of experiment. It's low cost, maybe even cheaper than the way it's done now. You don't have to have the area set up the table. It's quick and easy. Maybe we can learn from it. We can see if that changes the dialogue at all. Especially if these are routine meetings where you have one group of people and they have in the tables and then next meeting without it, and you can see if that changes the dialogue at all. That's a great experiment. Dell says create an online platform where participants can freely share their thoughts and feelings. I'd add to that, Dell, right? And online, it's safer maybe for people to post their thoughts. You all can decide if it's anonymous or not. That is a great way to collect data, help observe people, and encouraging them to do that, to not do that, and how you do that. Great. That's a neat experiment. Involving participants in planning and organizing the meeting could be one way of building their confidence to participate from Ideation. That is a great little experiment right there. Maybe let's involve them in the agenda development before we've designed it all, asking them questions. Excellent, excellent. Love these little experiments. And Tom is also encouraging people to fill out the documents for the Facilitator online network. So you I imagine that's the spot where you can continue this conversation, where you can come up with ideas. Maybe you can share ideas that you've done, these small experiments to get this. Try some leveling exercise where all participants feel the same thing or feel the same. Excellent. And I'm curious about leveling exercises. I'm not sure what those are. Mary, I don't know if you'd like to share about unmuting or curious.
Yes, actually, I was thinking two things. One, when you get them out of a physical space, Helen talked about inside the room, but I also realized if I have grounds wherever I'm training, the dynamics change completely when you make people go to the grass and speak from there. So that physical space, and you can easily deepen the conversations as much as possible. That is one. The other one, use of pictures, pictures that they resonate with, that also helps them. It's low risk, and they either recognize it, they will give their own experiences, and you even also able to deepen the conversation a lot more because it comes from the picture then into personalizing.
Mm-hmm. I like those pictures. That's a great way to get people to share how they feel, right? Sometimes you just, well, how do you feel? You might not get there, right? They're still saying what they think, but that picture, I think that is a really wonderful idea. Thank you for sharing that. I like that a lot. Great. So removing the tables, having pictures, exercise where you're leveling, getting people to understand those different perspectives. All right, Mary. All right, the other Mary, did you have thoughts on that? I think you unmuted yourself, so please share.
I wanted to share on the leveling exercise. Can you hear me?
Yes, yep, yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you see, when people come to a meeting, they have all different backgrounds. Some, I mean, you can never have a meeting where everybody is the same. So what we do is that we make these people exchange views, say what they are at home, their fathers, some of them are wives, some of them are, I mean, whatever they may have. So what we do is to level them out so that one doesn't feel that they are somebody or they are a wife or they are somebody in the office. So what we do is just let them talk and put whatever they have on paper, put it in a bag and lock it out, and it works. You just look and say, well, at the end of this meeting, you will be picking your names, you will be picking, except the name, you will be picking your whatever you have, whatever you feel. Or if you left home, you had children who were ill, then that is locked in the box. Afterwards, you can go back to your own life. So in that way, people can contribute more and can say, or they can think better towards whatever you are saying it, yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I love these ideas and these leveling, how important it is to recognize the humanity of everyone and those different perspectives and helping people relax and speak freely. And a couple of neat ideas there about that people are putting some great ones in there. Setting the ground rules. You got to ensure confidentiality where people trust each other too. And Robert also talks about the importance of good icebreakers. And he recently had a group sing Wheels on the Bus Go Round and Round, and they all relaxed and started speaking freely. And you know, it's funny, but I went to a talk a few weeks ago, and a lot of the research looking at the way brains work and things that we as society already know about when people sing together, they feel connected. They're actually now studying the brains and how people are going to sing. Like that's science is backing up the cultural knowledge we already know. That when you get people to sing together, that it does something where we feel more connected, we relax, those kind of things. And people are more productive. They're doing it when they have kids in a group sing together in a choir and then take these tests like math tests or something. They score better than otherwise, right? So there's they're able to test these things. So there's a lot of things, and I'm about policy agenda using kids and getting their ideas too, because they might be more open to share their ideas too. So I am going to move to the next slide because there's a lot of great experiments, a lot of brainstorming you're coming up with. I want you to continue testing these in your own. Next time you're in a meeting, you're leading these things, sharing it with each other. Again, this is that process about observing the people, forming the insights, trying those experiments, right? We've already come up with all these great things, and I thank you for doing that. Go to the next slide. This is a great link. So this is that field guide to human-centered design. IDEO put this together. You go to designkit.org. You can read more about it. You can download a free copy if you give them your email address, and or you can order a hard copy of it. But in that, there's a lot of free activities about ideas of using pictures, for example, to get people to share what they're thinking and feeling. Worksheets on how to frame insights, worksheets on how to define the challenge, and a bit more about this. But really a great, useful tool that as you all are trainers and facilitators, you'll probably come up with like, well, this would be a great idea. Let me try this even without doing the rest of the steps, but maybe I can do this to help people brainstorm or come up with these small experiments. We got a few minutes left, and I do want to open it back up for questions and that you all have. I think one of them that John had was about the cost of doing this and the time to do it. How do you make sure that the donors recognize the time and the importance of collecting data, observing people, going through that process, as opposed to coming up with a solution too early? Is what I'm reading into that, John. If I misinterpreted, please let me know as well. But other questions you have, thoughts? And I love that this is a network because you don't have to get everything answered right now. You all can continue that dialogue in the other times you're getting together. And Shannon or others, if you all have thoughts on how to engage donors in this and recognize the importance of some of those things, let us know. And I do want to just make sure that we get you all, since you're here, to see what the donor network, the African Food Security Network is, real quickly. Shannon, do you want to share what this, what we're seeing on the slide right now?
Happy to. So this is a screenshot of a sort of mini pod, a mini community on our network, which is specifically targeted at CADET focal points that we're sort of piloting just over the last few months. So we want to also, I guess you could call this a mini experiment in the design process with the Facilitator Trainer Network. So I know that you guys have been communicating and collaborating and sharing information over WhatsApp, and that works just fine. So what we'd like to test and pilot is moving or sort of enhancing some of that collaboration to a more of a Facebook social platform. So the additional things we'll be able to take advantage of are things like calendar, documents, there's polls and chat functions. So really the idea here is to move that same type of social interaction to a different environment and see if that added if those added benefits are something that makes sense for us. I think we definitely want to take advantage of a small group to test this out. So that's what we'll try to be doing here over the next few months. The form that we sent out where you put your contact details in is how we'll sign you up, and then you should receive more information from us about how to actually log in and create your profile. But yeah, I think the idea is not to replace anything that's working well, but kind of in the spirit of this design process, let's try a low-cost, simple experiment to see if this is something that we can really make use of.
Thank you, Shannon. Okay, we are at that time. It is the end of our webinar, and we would like to thank you all for your participation on this second webinar of the Trainer Facilitator Network. We'd also like you to fill out 3 questions for us, really quick, and Nancy's going to put them up on the screen. They're poll questions, and we're using the poll here as our evaluation. So each question will come up in turn, and we'll just ask that you answer the multiple choice question. These should be super easy, and you should see them in just a moment. And there's the first one about how useful this webinar was for you. If you could just answer, and it is anonymous, so don't worry. Please be fully honest with us. This will help us in preparing for our future webinars. And on that note, I hope you stay tuned to the network because we have another webinar coming up for you in just about a month. And we are planning that now and honing the details of exact date and topic. But at this point, we're looking at an online platform sharing tool that could be useful for you. and we will send out more information to the network just as soon as we've firmed up all of those details.
Yeah, just in case anybody's heard of it, the platform we're looking at is called Kumu, and the idea there is it's actually speaking to a lot of the things we talked about today. Is, you know, what's simple and easy ways to bring more information and viewpoints to bear on discussions. So kind of how do you broaden the aperture and bring people in to a process that might be with a few high-level people in a meeting room, but what are some easy ways using technology that we can leverage the insights and the perspectives of, you know, a broader group. So I think it's actually resonating with a lot of the things we were bringing up today.
Cool, and now we see this. Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Hi, everyone. This is Tom Wallace. I just wanted, as a clarifying point, again, we encourage everyone to sign up for the Facilitators Network with the form. There's a few people. If you're not interested, that's fine, but we noticed a few people didn't sign up. We encourage you to. We're about 15 people on the network now. But also on the Kumu note, Shannon, just to clarify, that is a relationship mapping tool. Is that correct? Can you sort of explain what that would be and how that would help?
Yeah, it's a variety of things, but yeah, it's basically, in a nutshell, a data visualization tool. So it can be relationships, it can be organizations, social networks, but it's a free and open source tool for data visualization.
Okay, and now the third question is up, the third and last question of the evaluation. All right, and the responses are coming in. So I guess from our spot in Arlington, we will say goodbye to you and many thanks.
Thank you so much for your engagement and thoughts. It was really great talking about this with you, and good luck on everything you're doing, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for your participation.
Thank you.
On the next one.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.